This is the Common Ground Stories podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Leath. The point of this podcast is to hear from ordinary people in their extraordinary life experiences. And today, I have a good friend of mine, Felix Rosado. He'll be my co-host on many of these videos. And he'll actually be introducing me as part of the introduction to the podcast. And so, Felix,
Nick.
man, great to have you as part of my podcast and to be my co-host.
Likewise, man. I'm super excited to finally get this going. I know that's something you've been talking about for a little while, and have a lot of really good ideas with it. So
I appreciate you being part of the team, being part of my team.
My pleasure. Likewise. So, So the reason why we kind of wanted to do it this way, we were talking a couple of days ago, right? And one of the things that we had mentioned is like the whole point of this podcast is to be talking to, ordinary people, hearing about their stories and things of that nature. And I think we kind of came to the conclusion that in order to really kick this off, we had to hear from you. I mean, this is like, this is your brainchild, this is like your idea. And what a disservice would it be if we didn't have like a similar format for you in terms of hearing your story. So I mean, so tell us like a little bit right now as far as what you're doing right now, just to kind of get into it, and then we'll just see where it kind of goes from there.
I work for a local utility company, and I'm working on this new podcast, of course, helping you out with your podcast. And how I got here was an interesting story. I'm from Florida, from Orlando, and I lived in New York for a while.
So you were born in Florida though?
Born and raised Orlando, Florida, in Claremont, suburb of Claremont. That's how we met. That's our kind of common ground.
Mm-hmm.
We met in Claremont, Florida.
Yeah. So for people that are not familiar, whereabouts is Claremont? Because I'm sure a ton of people know like about Orlando, Florida. A ton of people have been there. So whereabouts is Claremont? For those not familiar.
Claremont is about 45 minutes west of Orlando, due west of Orlando, in the hills, like they call it.
Okay.
Nice little small community, although it's booming out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming very popular.
Okay, so you were born and raised in Claremont. So how long did you stay there? Did you move? Because you mentioned you've been to some other places.
Yeah.
So what other places have you lived in, and what was Claremont like for you versus maybe some of these other places that you got to experience?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Orlando until about I was 6 years old or so.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Mineola, Claremont. They're in the same area, two sister cities.
Okay.
When I was about 6, and this was about 1999. And for the most part, my family has been in that region since then. And I've been there, I was there from 1999 to about 2005, and then I went back to Orlando around 2005 for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, I also was in West Virginia for about 6 months. That was an interesting story, interesting experience. My mom's from West Virginia. We came back, we relocated to Claremont with my dad, and then I went to high school in Claremont, Eastridge High School, where we met playing the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated high school, went to college in Orlando.
So now, like, what? I guess another question I have too is, what is Claremont like compared to maybe some of these other places that people are a little bit more familiar with? Because I'm sure one thing that comes up in a lot of people's minds when they first think of Florida, obviously one of the top destinations is going to be Orlando. Among other cities, you've got Tampa, Miami, obviously, but people think about Orlando and immediately think about the parks, you think about the big tourist attractions. So, I mean, what is life like in Claremont versus what people typically think of when they think of like Orlando or Central Florida in general?
So life in Claremont is, I think, much more laid back than Orlando. Most people live in houses, although now there's more condos and whatnot, but it's really hilly out there, a lot of lakes as well.
Hilly?
Yeah, very hilly in Claremont.
In Florida?
In Florida, very hilly.
Hills in Florida?
Hills in Florida, the
Okay.
hills, right? And now there's really nice neighborhoods in Claremont. They're building up around these lakes.
So I think it's one of the only places in Florida, right, that has that type of geography, right?
Yeah, very, very rolling hill, and they called it Claremont the Gym of the Hills, and it's like clay hills. They're like red dirt clay.
Okay.
And if you get on top of one of the hills, you can see downtown Orlando, which is about 20 miles from the top of some of those hills there. And they have another place in Claremont. There's a few little attractions, like I said, you got the lake, so there's a big beach there, in freshwater beach. you have this place called the Citrus Tower. It's an observation deck on this tower, about 200 feet tall, and you can see out all over the place. You know, back in the day, it was nothing but orange groves you could see. So now it's all houses and all built up.
So it's not like that anymore.
Not like that anymore. Very few orange groves, if anything. You can see Disney World sort of from the Citrus Tower, but very residential. A couple of commercial spaces. There's kind of like a big strip mall in Claremont now, but very small town.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 30, 40,000 people, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the hills, suburbs of Orlando.
Right. Okay. So it's not quite Orlando, but it's considered, you know, part of the greater Central Florida, Orlando area.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So then you mentioned that at some point you had to move. Was it to West Virginia? You
Yeah,
said
exactly.
you spent some time there. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, those were interesting circumstances. So at the time I lived with my mom. My brother and I lived with my mom. She's from West Virginia, and you know, she had a bit of a hard time in Florida. She always would go back and forth, West Virginia to Florida and so forth. So it was just one of those phases we were in. She wanted to go back to West Virginia for just, you know, be closer to her family, whatever the reasons were at the time.
Right.
I was into the 8th grade. So at the time I was really just getting good with playing the saxophone in the band. And so from an 8th grader, when you move them like that, that can, you know, you have to start all over from scratch. That can do quite some damage to a kid, just starting all over and be, you know, how you're gonna, you know, socially fit into new society. So that was a bit tough. But we got there. We lived with my aunt, my mom's sister at the time, and her children, her 4 children, more or less. And that was a tough experience we lived in Huntington, West Virginia. But I got in the school band, and I excelled right away. Actually, like 2 weeks after I moved there was an all-county audition. I made first chair as an 8th grader. I had only played for a year and a half at that point, made first chair, barely any time to practice. And then I was in this nice all-county band. So that was one of the few good experiences.
You got started with the saxophone at what age?
I was 12 years old, August 2005, not even 13.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
And what made you gravitate towards the saxophone?
When I was growing up, you know, kindergarten, a small child, I wanted to be like a rock superstar. I wanted to be like a rock superstar with like playing the guitars or the drums. And I always told my mom and dad, hey, when I become this rock superstar, I want you guys in the front row. Like, I had that dream.
Yeah.
And so when I came to 6th grade, I was in Claremont. I went to Claremont Middle School.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of wanted to be in band. I'm pretty sure they asked me what we want to be in. They put me in chorus.
Okay.
That was a rough experience. I couldn't sing.
They put you in chorus? Like you didn't have a choice in this?
Pretty much. I don't know how that happened.
Okay.
So I wanted to be in band. I was in agriculture one semester, and then the second semester I was in chorus. I really wanted to be in band. They put me in chorus.
Okay.
And that was okay. I mean, there are some life lessons from that. Actually, let's go back a little further. In 3rd grade, I played hand chimes and recorders.
Okay.
I actually played hand chimes pretty decently. We had some concerts with the hand chimes at Mineola City Hall, actually, believe it or not. Fast forward to 7th grade, I'm living with my mom. I want to be part of the school band. And so the school I was at, they put me in the band. And I really wanted to play drums. I really, really wanted to play drums. And, you know, as a 7th grader, 6th grader, when you start out, you try all these instruments. You try the drums, you try, you know, all the percussion instruments, woodwind instruments, brass instruments, whole 9 yards. And there was a lot of students there, but a lot of them, I did pretty good at drums. Like, you know, they grade you. I did pretty good at drums, but I guess some other students did better at drums. And so they kind of, the band director at the time, this was in Seminole County in Winter Springs, he kind of had his drum section filled out. And then he kind of had all his other sections filled out, but he didn't have a lot of saxophones. And when it came to playing saxophone, I was not good at it at all. I think I did pretty well at the drums and either like trumpet or trombone, something like that. When it came to saxophone, I couldn't make a sound out of it. I mean, I had no intention on playing the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes to me and he said, well, yeah, we have all the drummers picked out. You know, we have a lot of trumpets, this and that. He's like, we only have one other saxophone player. He's like, do you want to play the saxophone? And so I was open to it, so I said, sure. And then he was like, do you want to play alto or tenor? And I'm like, what? There's more than one? I was like, I don't know. So, okay, just play alto. So then I get home that day, you know, whatever the situation was, and I tell my mom I'm playing a saxophone. She goes,
And these are different types of saxophones within like different keys, different like sizes of saxophone,
yeah,
right?
there's different sizes.
Right.
Different
Okay.
types of saxophones, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They look different, they sound different, they play different music. So I started off playing the alto saxophone. And my mom was very supportive. Got a saxophone, rented a saxophone for me. Remember, it was a Jupiter student model saxophone. So we did that, but I was only at that school for like 2 months. And then we moved to Winter Park, and I then I was in the Lee Middle School band, and so I played for their band program, got in right away, I was a beginning band student, more or less. And then I was there for about a year and some change, then we moved to West Virginia. No, right before we moved to West Virginia, a couple weeks before that or so, beginning of the semester, this would have been 2006, August 2006. I'm 1 year in, and I'm an 8th grader now. They had auditions to be like first chair, second chair, which is like the main saxophone player, the section leader. There's what we call sections: a saxophone section, a clarinet section, a trumpet section. And so you need a section leader, which is called the first chair or the second chair, right, or the lead player. And at the time, I'd been practicing for like 3 or 4 hours a day on my own every day, just figuring it out, hard knuckling it. And there was another kid who was a 7th grader, but he had the same amount of time playing as me. He started in 6th grade, now he's in 7th grade. But he had actually a teacher, so he was really good at playing. Open door contest type thing. Everybody's listening to all the auditions. It's in front of the band director and the choir director. They're judging it in front of everybody else, all the students in the band room. And it came down between me and the other guy who was in 7th grade with the teacher. They asked us to play the chromatic scale. That was a tiebreaker, because I think we were tied up to that point. Mm-hmm. I nailed it. Flawless. Real fast up and down. Didn't miss a note. The other kid, on the way back, he's playing the chromatic scale and he misses a note, and it was obvious. And so I think I had it in the bag. I didn't know until like the next week. I think that was a Friday. Come Monday, I'm like, oh man, I'm nervous this whole week.
Yeah.
They post who's who on like a sheet of paper, publicly. Walking school that day, boom, first chair. Oh, that was great.
So you ended up getting the first chair, mostly due to, because like you said, chromatic scale, for those that are not familiar with it, you're basically playing every single note. Every note, going up and going down. So when you miss it, especially to somebody that has a musically trained ear, you can notice if somebody misses that note, right? Yeah. So you played that flawlessly, and that's what let you. So to me, it kind of sounds like saxophone went from something that you were maybe not necessarily against, but you didn't necessarily have any strong feelings towards it.
That's right.
And then, so I mean, like, what changed for you though? Because it sounds like from the time that you started to at least this point, it sounds like you cared about it, right? It sounds like you were not indifferent to possibly becoming a section leader and or first chair. So I mean, like, how did that come about?
At the time, it was a really rough time in my life and my family's life. So, and I was doing all this moving around. Mm-hmm. So I needed something that grounded me. Was moving so much, so I didn't really have a lot of friends. I didn't have really any friends. We were always moving. I'm in a really kind of, when we lived in Winter Park, we lived in a bad part of Winter Park, if you guys can imagine that. On like the corner of like Orlando, Winter Park, and Eatonville and Maitland. Not a really good area at the time. Now it's much better. But anyways, it was kind of a bad situation to be in. Low income housing type deal. And so that's the only thing I could do. And I picked it up and I realized, hey, once I got to be able to make a tone out of it, make a sound out of it, I ended up liking it a lot. And I thought it was just something that kept me grounded, something I could work toward as a goal. And I just kept playing. And I was like, well, hey, I'm playing the saxophone. There's other people playing the saxophone. And it became competitive. Well, if I'm going to play, I want to be the best. I want to be better than everybody. Mm-hmm. I want to prove to others that I'm a good saxophone player. I'm the best saxophone player, and I want to work hard toward this goal. Something that I can work hard toward, and it's also a learning experience.
So you found something that you could kind of like pour your energy into, and really take pride in.
Absolutely.
And in a way, it almost sounds like it kind of gave you a connection with other people too, because when you're competing with people, you're still in a certain sense connected with other people, because at least like, so you guys are at least working towards the same goal. You may be somewhat at odds with the other person, but at least there's like that connection there. So you're still in a certain sense like connected to other people.
Right.
So okay, very, very interesting. So this was all right before you moved to West Virginia.
Yeah. So that was in August roughly of September 2006.
So all this is going on at the same time.
Yeah, and then my mom's at the same time, roughly around the time, saying, she's wanting to move to West Virginia, this and that. She's having some problems in life, and around December of 2006, her and my brother moved to West Virginia, and I was protesting it all the way. I mean, fighting it like big time. The band at the time, the middle school band, had an invitation to play the Star Spangled Banner as an opener for the Orlando Magic, for an Orlando Magic's game. And I remember it was on January, I believe it was January 7th, 2007. The Orlando Magic played, I believe, the Dallas Mavericks. And that was a time where there was Dwight Howard, there was Rashad Lewis, all these great players at the time. During the era, they were all there. And so my mom ditched in December the games in January. And I was upset about that, big time.
So you didn't get to play there?
Yeah, I did get to play there. What happened was, this was also time around winter break, so you have a time period where there's no class. Well, thankfully, I protested it. I made I wouldn't say a show out of it, but I did everything I could to stay there, and it worked. My aunts and uncles, extended family, I stayed with some of them in the area until January. Played the game, and I think right after that, I moved up.
So so it pretty much sounds like that was kind of like a chance of a lifetime type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like a once in a lifetime type of opportunity, and it's like you're not gonna take me away from this right before it happens.
Yeah.
Right. So you ended up made that happen.
Yeah.
In other words, staying with family and things like that.
And that's sort of a precursor to what happens later on in high school. We'll get to.
Gotcha.
But it's interesting to note some of these parallels. I really wanted to stay there the rest of my 8th grade year, but that unfortunately wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. So okay, so we've been talking so far about a lot of your music, and it sounds to me like music was a huge part of your, at least your middle school, kind of around that age experience. What effect did all of that have on you, I guess, going more into high school and then kind of going into college and stuff like that? What sort of effect did that have on you, or what lessons did you learn from music, and how did you carry that forward with you? So we fast forward, right, 8th grade, I finish up in West Virginia, first chair in the band there. I was in the all-county band as first chair, and that was a phenomenal experience. The conductor was a phenomenal person. It was actually a woman conductor, and we played some really good music, and that was a great experience. Fast forward a couple months, boom, I'm in Florida, 9th grade, back in Claremont. Unfortunately, I got to Claremont 2 weeks or so late, and I wasn't able to play in the marching band that year. But later on that year, in December, that's when we meet, December of 2007, for the jazz band audition. So I was preparing to get back, preparing to join the East Ridge High School band, and I really wanted to be a part of it. I knew the band, had some successes, and I really wanted to learn. I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to be in the jazz band. At that point, I had never been in it. I think I was in the jazz band in the last term of middle school in West Virginia, but that was a very small school, very small band. I really wanted to be in a high school jazz band and the wind ensemble. And again, I wanted to keep growing, learning as much as I could, and be the best I could. And so that's kind of what shaped my motivation. I had my own motivation to be good. I wanted to prove myself to others and to myself that I can do this. I see. So you would say you kind of, that attitude that you had adopted from very early on of wanting to kind of latch onto something to where you could kind of prove to yourself and to other people, it's I can pour my energy, my time into something like this, and it be worth something then. In the end of all that. So joining all these different ensembles now, was there anything else within high school that you found yourself heavily involved with, or was it mostly just music? Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of been in the back of my mind, because obviously that's not what you're what you're doing now.
You know, I didn't make the jazz band that year, my freshman year. But I remember that was the first time we played in the jazz band for the audition. Now, my perspective of it was we met, and I'm pretty sure you were sizing me up as a player, going, oh man, another saxophone player. Who's this guy probably? And I was doing the same thing, man. Okay, I know Felix. He's like the, you know, I already could tell you're the saxophone section leader of the jazz band, and you meant business. You just had that look that you meant business, and everybody else kind of was also gravitating to you as well. That hey, this is the guy to beat. This is the guy you want to be around. X, Y, and Z. So I'm like, man, I have to figure out a way to get at least on this guy's level, because I don't think I'm ever going to beat him, because he just had that kind of energy and that kind of charisma and leadership. But I'm like, I need to prove myself to him, or even not to him. I just need to try to get on that level and play with him. I wanted to play right there next to you. Not necessarily even beat you out, but be right there next to you as a player. And so, you know, we had a lot of struggles with that. You know, we finally did end up playing together a lot. You're 1 year ahead of me, so I was, you know, coming to my sophomore year, I was in wind ensemble. I was a backup saxophone player in the jazz band, so we played. And then again in my senior year, I was Barry sax. You were lead alto in the jazz band, and I thought that was a great time, great run together. And you know, so I graduated high school. I applied for the music program at UCF, music education. I get in. I start college 3 weeks after high school. So I, you know, graduate in June. For me, it was June 2011. 3 weeks later.
So none of this like taking time off, no like semester off or anything like that. Just like right into it.
Yeah.
Now, is that because you knew for certain that you want to do, or like was there anything that kind of like influenced your timeline with that? Because I know like plenty of people, they like to take a semester off, or everybody's got their own different reason.
So it just happened to work out like that. Now what happened was when I applied to UCF, and I don't know how this happened, but there was some program called the STEP program, supporting teachers, education professionals, or something like that. There was some type of program. I don't even know how. I didn't apply for it. I guess they found me, and they wanted me to be a part of this learning experience and kind of like a leadership development and teacher development program. Mm-hmm. And so this program required you to start in the summer term. And so that was great because, you know, I didn't want to be at home I wanted to graduate and move out of the house quickly. And so that provided that opportunity. And so I was very grateful for that. I learned a lot in that program. And so 3 weeks later, I'm off to UCF. You know, I had a dorm for my whole first year on my own as an adult, 18 years old. And then of course fall semester starts, and I was in the saxophone studio. In the saxophone studio is where you have a private professor teaching private students, and you see him once a week, and he gives you a bunch of stuff to work on, like all types of like saxophone techniques, literature, X, Y, and Z, to help you really get better.
And had you ever had that before? Had you ever had any type of private instruction prior to going to college?
Absolutely. So in high school I did. I came to the point where I was in 10th grade or 11th grade. I think it was in 10th grade. I ended up on my own for the most part. I found somebody. There was a guy at a music store in Claremont. It was Cornerstone Music, and his name was Mr. B. He was the owner of it, and he's a drummer. He's kind of a well-known drummer in Central Florida. And he's like, "Hey, if you're interested in taking lessons, go see this guy. His name is Chris King. He'll help you out." And he gave me his number or whatever, and I did. I called him, and sure enough, we set up some lessons at his house. And he's a performer now. He's a firefighter, but now he's kind of got back into performing. Great guy, great musician, and he taught me a lot. He helped me with everything I needed help with in high school, but particularly what he helped me with was, of course, my scales, my technique, and there's this thing in high school called solo and ensemble, where you play a solo with a pianist, and you go up in front of a judge who's like a teacher, like a professional saxophone teacher. It probably could be like a professor at a university or a high school, and they grade you on your performance. You can get like superior, that's like the top score you can get. You can get excellent, you can get good, fair, or poor. Now, my sophomore year, okay, so it must have been my junior year, or maybe my sophomore year, I can't remember, one of the two. My sophomore year, I ended up not doing that great. I think I got an excellent or a good.
Now you're talking about sophomore year of
high school.
Of high school, okay.
When I did sewing ensemble. You know, I didn't do too well, but I had my private instructor. I'm pretty sure by 11th grade, I had him in 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Got superiors.
Would you say that seeing the example of your private instructor was like, would you say he was one of the influencing factors of what made you want to go into music education? Or just performance in general when it came time to go into
not necessarily that, but he gave me a great introduction of how a lesson would be run in college. And in fact, he showed me literature like saxophone music that was so beyond my comprehension. When I saw this, I'm like, people can play this? I was like, how is this even possible? It's like, oh yeah, people can play this, like sight read it, just see it for the first time and play it perfectly. And that blew my mind. I'm like, wow, then I'm like, I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And here, then a couple years later, I'm playing that same music that he was talking about. At first, of course, it was a struggle, but it then became second nature.
Yeah. So in other words, this piece that you're like, how can people even?
Yeah. Etudes. They were etudes.
Yeah. How can even people play this, let alone sight reading?
Exactly.
Which for those that don't know, sight reading is pretty much when you look at a piece of music for the first time, you've never seen it before, and you're expected to just play it right there on the spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Play it almost perfectly.
Perfectly.
Like how it should sound. And you don't know how it sounds. You're seeing it for the first time.
Yeah. The English language, you can pick up any book and you can just start reading it just like that.
Yeah.
Likewise, with any, when you reach a certain technical proficiency with an instrument and sight reading proficiency, you should be able to just pick up a piece of music and play it reasonably well.
That's right.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is now you're in college, you're going through like music education. Now, did you finish that program, or like what was that like? How was that program kind of going through it from the beginning to the end? And when you finally left UCF, like what did you end up leaving with?
So I'll walk you through some of the beginning stages. So I started in the summer, in summer of 2011, summer B. So this is the last week of June. Here I am, fresh out of high school. I had some grants, a few grants, but I was living in student housing, so I had to take out some loans, and I needed.
Did you have a job at this point?
So I was about to get into first day of college. I needed a job. I got a job right there, pretty much on the spot, on campus at a Domino's Pizza.
At a Domino's.
Yeah, Domino's Pizza.
Were you making the pizza? Were you delivering them?
At first, no. I was just a cashier.
Okay, cashier.
And now, granted, this was not a lot of money. This was, in fact, poverty level, okay, for sure. Because I remember my dad...
this would have been what year? 2011. 2011, okay.
So here's how it works. So I went to college. My dad, everybody's extremely proud of me. The first person in my family to really go to college, a 4-year university. They're proud of me, and they were somewhat supportive. They certainly could have been a lot more supportive. That was a struggle in high school. But they realized, hey, this is serious, okay? And they're glad I'm in college, but they couldn't financially support me too well. They did as much as they could. My mom helped me out, my dad did. When I moved out of the house to college, he helped me move over there to UCF, and he gave me a couple $100. I can't remember, maybe $500 to say, hey, this is it. This is what I can give you, and you're on your own basically after that. And he helped me out a couple of times, after that, down the road. But just as an initial thing, here's what I can give you, and you got to figure it out. So I'm like, okay, well, I need a job. Got the job at Domino's. Making minimum wage at the time, $7.25, something like that. But, I made a couple hundred, maybe $100, $200 a week. That's all I needed. That was more than enough for me. I just lived bare minimum, just to get through. And that helped me out at first, And free food, free pizza here and there.
Always helps.
Always helps.
Yeah.
Probably got in trouble eating free pizza in the back. While I'm on duty.
I think we both been there.
So, the owner of the store, I'm friends with him on Facebook, great guy, his name is Artie. He walks in the back door. I'm sitting there too, eating his pizza.
Busted.
He busted. He throws the thing in the trash, get back to work. It's like, oh man,
Yeah. So you're working, so you're working at Domino's this whole time, just trying to support yourself through college.
Year.
I mean,
that particular year, for about a year and a half.
Okay, for about a year and a half. Did you end up getting another job after that, or did you? Was there any point where you said, oh, I just need to focus on studies?
I needed a job. So here's what happened. So Did summer program. Like there was 2 classes I did in summer. They were easy. I mean, they were kind of like, one was like a pre-education class, and the other one was like an elective class called SLS, like 1,000 or some joke of a class, just a way for them to get money. Total waste of time. BS class. It was part of the program, so I had to take it. And then I'm working dominoes at night. Fall semester comes. As a music student, you have to be in a major ensemble. Now, at the time, if I look back, I would have done this differently. I would have probably been in like concert band or applied or like tried out for the wind ensemble. But that year, I wanted to be in marching band, so I did. I was in marching band. 400 or 500 people, several hundred people for sure on the field. So I was in marching band, and that took up so much time. It wasn't like marching band in high school at all. Non-competitive, mostly fun, mostly non-music majors. You're just doing it for fun, doing it to go to the games for free, stuff like that. And the vibe was just different. Not necessarily bad, but a vibe that it didn't really match my vibe. I wasn't really vibing with it. And so it kind of became a chore.
Now you said kind of going back, you probably wouldn't have done that. So what do you think? So first of all, what was your objective in studying music? Was it to become a performer, or were you primarily interested in teaching? Which one was it?
At first, it was to become a band director. At first,
To become a band
for
director.
like the first 3.5 years.
What for you in that was like called to you to become a band director? Like where was the satisfaction in it for you? I mean, I know some people that what was your motivation, I guess?
Well, there's a couple of things. Seeing the band director I had in middle school, a couple of them. I had a couple band directors, and then the band director in high school, and seeing the greatness that you can teach these kids and have a good music program, and seeing other great music programs too, and going, wow, I could be director of a great music program. Okay, now that's what you see on the outside. When it comes down to it, you have to take a lot of music education classes. Most of them were great. Learned a lot from most of them. Some of the requirements, though, are what got me.
So would you say that being able to replicate that experience from other children is kind of like what led you to want to become a teacher?
To a degree.
To a degree.
Mostly just saying, hey, our band director, his name is Mr. Hart. He's great. He led a great band. A couple other band directors out there, great other programs. I'm like, hey, I want to be like that. That was mainly, I think, my motivation. We had a good experience in high school. In band. I'm like, hey, I want to do this.
Kind of being able to see somebody run this whole like operation, basically, where you're managing multiple ensembles at the same time, and everybody's kind of got their own specialties. These different professionals and techs that you're working with. One person works with like a woodwind ensemble. The other person's like working with percussion, that type of thing.
And I guess also too, conducting a band in a high school setting.
Yeah.
That was my initial motivation. Get down to it. One of the things that threw me off, well, there's a couple of things, so I'll go through them. I started playing more and more heavily, performing on the saxophone player, more than the average music education student. So for sure, music education students, you have 6 semesters out of the 8. You have 6 doing private lessons, and during that time, you also have to do some performances. You have to do a junior recital, 30 minutes. So I did that. But I performed a lot more than a lot of them were performing. I was better, I think, than a lot of music education majors were. I was like really practicing all the time, every single day, hours and hours every single day. A couple things got me. So one of them was there was this elementary education music class I had to take. Because in Florida and probably most states, in order to be a band director, you're a band director K through 12, meaning you can teach elementary, middle, high school. I was only interested in high school. Maybe middle school, but certainly not elementary school.
So even though technically somebody may be, for example, a high school band director, but they have to be qualified to be able to teach K through 12, is what you're saying?
Yeah, so high school band director has a certification to teach elementary school or middle school. Which it makes sense, but I wasn't interested in all that stuff.
That's not what you wanted to do.
So one of the things was there's 3 components of this that it ended it pretty quickly for me. So fast forward junior year, first semester, and it was only offered in the fall each year. So once a year in the fall was the elementary music education class. This class was at the time, I don't know if it still is, at UCF, run by a person, a teacher, a professor who, this was her only class. She was an elementary school teacher in the public school system, and she taught this class for college music educators. And so we had to do in this class is she kind of set it up like an elementary music class would look like, with like the small hand chimes and the little xylophones and vibraphones and all these little things, all these little musical instruments for kids to start off with, and little books and stuff like that. One of the things was you have to set up lesson plans based on a curriculum, and you have to like do it dumbed down for like kindergartners, first graders, and all this stuff, and you have to kind of like teach it. And I couldn't do it. I ended up, I think I did the first one. There was like 3 you had to do, and you have to teach them to everybody. I couldn't do it. I just stopped going to the class.
So that
I just stopped going to the class. I didn't drop it because that would affect some other stuff. I just stopped going.
You just stopped going.
And that was the first thing. The second thing wasn't necessarily a big of a deal, but didn't necessarily like it. You had to go to schools, and you had to like watch teachers do their job.
Okay, so you had to have some like observation.
Yeah, you have observation hours. That's exactly what they call it. And I forget how many you had to do. I don't know if there was a set amount, but that was a lot of time. You also had to find teachers that were willing to let you sit in.
Did you spend some time doing that?
I did some time on all levels: elementary school, middle school, and high school.
So it sounds like what really got you was the elementary.
Well, that was part of it. What got me then was, I know some colleges, if not most, you have to do a music internship. You have to take a course that you end up teaching for a school, but it's like a 12 credit hour course, or a 3 or 6 credit hour course, and you pay for it. You have to go to the school and teach, and instead of you getting paid from the school, being there all day or half a day, you actually have to pay the university
to take that
class. Some schools just require 1. UCF requires 2. The first one is forget it was 3. If it was 3, I never made it that far. I think it was either 3 or 6. It was like a half day for like a couple days a week, and then the second one was every single day of the week. You're there for the whole semester, and you can't have a job or nothing. It's like you're like basically a teacher. The teacher like steps back and just, I don't know, does whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in most contexts, that would just be called having to take a class. They wouldn't call that an internship. An internship normally you're at least getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So
that was a big turnoff for me.
Okay.
Just from a financial standpoint, how am I going to, without taking out debt?
Yeah, right. Because it's like, well, if I got to spend like half the day here at the school, then what time does that leave me for studying, other practice, and then having a job on top of that?
Or being there full time, the whole 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And people do it. I don't know how or why. I mean, there's many people that we know that have done it.
At least what I'm hearing is that it wasn't worth the trouble that.
Not for me.
What do you do at that point then? Because you've already poured so much time into kind of going. Because it sounds like there's 2 main tracks, right? That you can go down this education route that you've been going down, versus this performance route. So I mean, what do you do now that you're kind of at a standstill? You're like, I don't want to do this like K through 12 type thing. I don't want to make these lesson plans. I don't want to spend half my day at a school, and I got to pay them to be there. So it's like, what do you do at that point?
That's a good question. So here's how it works. At UCF, there's actually 4 different tracks.
4 tracks, okay.
No, one of them is music general, and it's 2 years of private lessons, so 4 semesters. The other one's music education, 3 years, 6 semesters. Music performance, all 4 years, every semester you're doing your private lessons. And I think the 4th one is jazz studies, something like that. I believe there's a jazz studies track. Can't remember exactly what that entails. So I went from, my junior year, this was in the fall of 2013. At the end of that, I decided I'm not going to pursue this no longer. Didn't want to be a band director for those reasons and a few other reasons. Talked to my private teacher, and I said, hey, I want to do music performance. And he said, okay, no problem. Just have to do, I think I did an audition, and I did, no problem. Easy. So the next semester, I'm a music performance student. And that was a great experience for that one semester. So then that semester, I had my junior recital, played some beautiful works, 3 different pieces. Played a concerto on the alto saxophone, played another alto saxophone piece, and I played a tenor saxophone piece. And had a great pianist. I met I worked at Sam Ash at the time, Sam Ash Music Stores, and I actually became the department manager by that time in the woodwind and brass section. And at the time, there was this lady that worked there. Her name was Christine Ahrens, who was a private teacher on the piano, and she was phenomenal. She had wrote her own music, all this stuff. And I needed when you're a music student, you need a pianist. So I had a couple of pianists. I wanted to get the best one I could find. She was amazing. So I approached her one day, kind of developed a working relationship. And I said, Christine, I need a pianist this year.
Now you're talking, just to kind of give context, you're talking about somebody that's going to be able to accompany you when you're playing solos and things of that nature, right?
That's right. I had a couple, but one in particular, he was a good friend of mine. We were in a music fraternity called Phi Mi Alpha. But he had his own things going on, so he probably couldn't devote enough time to the music I was playing. And so my saxophone teacher was like, you better get a different pianist this time and make sure it's a good one. So I was trying to look for a good pianist.
Because at the end of the day, you guys have to work together a lot.
You guys got to
be in sync, right?
Yeah. You have to have one that knows your part and knows their part very well. Doesn't miss a beat. And so I showed Christine the music, and she agreed to be my pianist. And it was a great thing. Talking about working well together, it was fantastic. And I'm glad she was my pianist. I mean, she got me through that whole year, my junior recital, and even stuff. She actually wrote a piece for me after that. Later on down the road, she wrote a piece because she writes music. So she wrote a tenor saxophone and piano piece, and it was beautiful. We played it at UCF. But so that was in the spring of 2014. Me and you had a trip planned to go to New York as a road trip. That was a really great experience. I'm glad we got to experience that. We drove up my car on a Sunday night in June, early June that year, and I just wanted to have a great time. I had really no expectations other than just seeing what the city was all about. I'd never been in New York before, and of course, you're from the city, you lived out there, so you knew all about it, and it was kind of like you showed me around a lot of stuff. And I get there, and I'm just blown away by what I'm seeing. I mean, wow, this huge city, something like this actually exists. And I worked at Sam Ash at the time. I remember I actually went into the Sam Ash store there on 34th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. And I introduced myself. I told them I worked at one of the stores in Orlando. And the regional manager who was positioned at that store, his name was Manny Goldrich. He's a well-known name because he owned Manny's Music on 48th Street, where Music Row was. His grandfather was Manny, and Sam Ash bought out Manny's, and Ian Goldrich was the regional manager. So he's a pretty big figure. At this time, I don't know any of that stuff. I'm just walking in there, not even knowing who I'm talking to. You should be approaching this guy a little bit differently, but I just walked right up to him, introduced myself. I'm the store manager, and it was either him or the store manager, maybe both. They look at my numbers. It's all sales based, commission based with a base salary. But they're like, if you want to come live here, we'll give you a job. And so, that was a couple of days in, so that's all I could really think about from there. I was like, wow, man, I could actually come up here and live.
So first time in the city, you're blown away, and then you go visit Sam Ash, and then they tell you, yeah, if you pretty much just move here, you've got a guaranteed position with their store.
Yeah. And we visited. At the time, I was in the process of converting to Catholicism. It was non-denominational Christian. I had been baptized, but you actually introduced me to the Catholic Church and to the Byzantine Rite, and so I was also in the process of doing that. We visited one of the Byzantine churches in New York, St. Mary's on 15th Street. Beautiful experience. We were there for Pentecost Sunday in 2014, and it was just the whole trip was just a joyful experience. It was just beautiful. I mean, great weather, everything went pretty well. I had a little bit of an idea of what the city was like, but I had never been there, so I didn't really fully understand how big the city was.
Right.
So when we were driving through New Jersey, I was looking for the skyline, and I think I was pointing to Newark or something like that.
I remember it was kind of hilarious because you were pointing. I think you were just pointing to some
small little city,
small little apartments. On the New Jersey side of things. You're like, oh my god, that's New York. I can't believe it. I'm like, no, dude, that's not New York. that's New York, and then like pointing to like the skyscrapers and everything, and just like
Yeah,
you know?
I was driving. I couldn't believe it because it was like down. You could see the whole thing. You could see downtown and midtown and uptown and
That
the whole thing.
that I will say that was something to witness your excitement and everything at that point. So I mean, like, what did because I mean, shoot, it sounds like there was a lot kind of going on at the same time between potential job transition. You're in a new place that you've never been to before. You also mentioned some stuff about like with your faith and things that were going on with that. So I mean, like, what's all like going through your mind at this time? Plus, I mean, you know, you spent some time talking about your experience within an educational context with music, and then how things kind of had to like pivot last minute. So I mean, what at this point? Because I mean, obviously, kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, obviously, you're not doing that stuff right now.
Yeah.
So, but at this point in your life, like, what does Nick want to do? What is your focus? Like, what are you trying to move towards?
So before we take the trip to the city, you know, I just finished my junior year of college, and my intention and expectation was I'll finish out the next year, or however long it would take. I would continue with it on the music performance track, but I didn't really have an idea what I was going to do.
So basically, your plan was to become a professional performing musician with like an ensemble.
Not necessarily.
Because I had just jumped to it the semester before, and really I didn't. Even before that, I knew that music performance wasn't really a profession that works out for most people.
What do you mean?
Like, there's not really, it's not like you're an engineer and then you become like you're studying engineer, and then there's like, different, like 100 different companies.
You can just go on Indeed and,
just go on Indeed and like, you become like a junior engineer somewhere or something like that. It doesn't work like that for the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
When you become a performing artist, it's tough. There's very few jobs out there. Like, if you're a violinist, there's a few more jobs or something like that where like you can perform in an orchestra maybe, like, your local orchestra, like Orlando Philharmonic or different orchestras. Well, in an orchestra, there's no saxophone. There's only saxophone on particular occasions when there's a particular piece of music that needs one, and then they call in a professional. Usually it's the music teacher that is at your local college. So I knew that this was kind of going to be a wait and see what happens. So this trip that happens was almost like it was a godsend. I don't even know how else to explain it. This trip's almost like a crater comes down from Earth and knocks me off my horse.
Because so basically what you're saying is that as far as like music performance was concerned, you really didn't know what type of future, if any, there was going to be for you, and then this opportunity kind of like falls out of the sky and falls into your lap, and it's like, well, hey, if you want to move here, like, you can have a job here.
Yeah.
Is basically what happened.
I fell in love with the city instantly. I kind of seen the stuff on the street. You kind of seen the homelessness and the dirty streets. I was shocked about how dirty the subways were, but I'm like, okay, you know what? This doesn't really bother me at this point.
Yeah, it's like we're not in Claremont anymore.
Yeah, we're not in Claremont, we're not in Orlando, Florida anymore, where it's like, sparkling clean in comparison.
Right.
There was just something that was just telling me I could just see myself living there. I could just see myself, the beautiful city. In the summertime, you don't get a lot of rain, just beautiful sunshine, really warm.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't see it any other way from that point. And it was just, the accessibility, being able to walk everywhere and do this or that, right there in the city. And I tried to convince myself otherwise, but I couldn't, and nobody else could. And so that's all I could think about at that point. In fact, and I was even thinking about, okay, this is only going to happen if it just falls into place. And it literally just fell into place. There's no other way to describe it.
So how soon after you visited there for the first time, how long did it take for you to actually like make the move up there and everything?
So that trip was the first week of June 2014. We get back and I immediately start like planning. Well, first off, I asked some people, like my parents, some other people, mentors, to get advice on what I should do. They kind of give me advice. I also figure out some things on my own. And then I start preparing on moving there. My lease ended at my apartment in end of July that year. So boom, I can have 2 months, I'm out. So I told, I arranged it with Sam Ash by the end of July, I'm going to move up there.
So within 2 months, okay. So would you say that when something really makes sense to you, that you just kind of go, like, it doesn't sound to me like you're much of a person for like hesitation and like double and triple checking things before.
Well, I did, you know. The helpful thing was I had a job, and then okay, find a place to live. You know, that was tough. It's extremely expensive there, but I did that. First apartment was in Brooklyn, and just had all my ducks in a row. Everything else kind of fit in line pretty easily in comparison. That was the biggest thing. Some people move to New York or another city without a job. I don't know how those people do it. I just had a job, so it's just mainly like, do you want to move or not? You know, and then like, if you move, what are you leaving behind? Like, what's it going to impact? You know, I had to drop out of school.
Yeah.
You know, my professor at the time, Dr. Wormchuk, I wouldn't say he was mad, but he was probably shocked that I'm making this move, which probably seemed sudden to him.
Yeah.
And I think he advised me, hey, you probably should finish up. But I'm thinking, all I can think was about like, hey, I got this opportunity in New York, and I kind of wanted to like pursue music there and like performing there or this or that.
Yeah.
You know, I worked at Sam Ash.
Because I mean, it's New York. You're gonna have way more opportunities to, you know, to make it out there than Orlando, than Florida.
Yeah, and at Sam Ash, I ended up picking up a lot of students because unlike some of their stores, they have like in Florida where they have like a music studio where like they have teachers privately in their studios. They didn't have the space for that in New York, so they didn't have any in-house teachers. So whenever somebody would ask, hey, do you know any private saxophone teachers or clarinet teachers or oboe teachers or piano teachers? Yeah, I sure do. I'm one of them. Here's my card. Here's my information. So I actually got a lot of students out of that. Short term, but
so isn't that something? So you spend all this time doing music education for, you know, quite a few semesters. You're on the verge of making lesson plans for kids, you know, playing their recorders and little xylophones and whatnot, and then you say, screw that, I'm not doing that. You end up moving to New York, and then not only does a job at Sam Ash fall into your lap, but with that come students who actually want to learn the instruments that you already have expertise in.
Yeah, they learn the instruments that I'm selling to them.
So you end up ironically, you end up doing music education without formally pursuing it.
Yes,
in a sense.
privately.
Is that something that you anticipated yourself doing? Like, is that something that you were expecting, or did that just kind of fall like into your lap unexpectedly, and then you just kind of took it on as more and more people showed interest?
I figured that would probably be the case. I figured as much being in New York and they had no teachers in house, and I knew people were going to come and ask me because they did in Orlando, but for the most part I had to, you know, sell or pitch the in-house teachers we had. So people say, hey, do you have teachers? Yeah, we got X, Y, and Z here. When I came to New York, you want to learn how to play saxophone? I can teach you how to play. I went to school. I know how to play. And the only thing I didn't do, which is kind of hard to do, it could be off-putting to a lot of people, is like having them sign a contract. Because then that commits them to a certain amount of lessons for a certain amount of time, paying a certain amount of dollars. And maybe it works for some people, but I figured, you know what, I'm not going to do that because I might not get anybody to really want to commit.
Well, because in a certain sense, it's like maybe you can understand signing a contract with someone who maybe has like tons of experience in, you know, in an ensemble or something like that, like a really, really well-known name. But for someone such as yourself, if you're just starting out in that position, it almost sounded like you didn't want to make it more difficult for you to acquire students than it needed to be.
Exactly.
Is that right? What would you say for somebody? Because I mean, I know there's, you know, obviously music programs in schools are like a really big thing, and you know, at least from what I remember and from what you're telling me too, music seems like it's something that a lot of people consider making a future in. So I mean, what would you say to a student who is thinking about going into music, especially as like a career choice? What advice would you have for them of wanting to get into it? Is it worth getting into?
I'd say that if you want to become a band director, if you're really passionate about it, do it. But be very passionate about it and have a plan. Walk in there with a plan and take it very seriously, but understand what you're walking into. Understand what the curriculum is going to be. Every school's a little bit different, but overall, you're going to have to take a lot of education classes, music education classes, general education classes. If you want to teach high school and you don't want to teach middle school or elementary school, or if you want to teach one but not the others, you might have a hard time in college. There's the internship aspect. That's not for everybody. So if you're thinking to yourself, if you're trying to hold a job, if you need a job in college, you're going to have to do the internship, and you're probably going to have to give up your job. And most places in the country, when you start out being a music teacher, or any teacher for that matter, you don't start off making a lot. Even teachers that are down the road 20, 30 years in don't make very much money. Not even $60,000. Florida, probably 50, 60. Be surprised if they made more than $60,000, maybe 70. No, that's not a lot for a long-term career. So think really hard. Maybe if you say, okay, I want to go to college for music education, but then go back to do performance or some other music degree, get your master's degree, and then maybe become a private instructor, or maybe if you're extremely talented with a master's degree, or go back for a doctoral degree, become a music professor. Also hard, but if you're on that level, then that's an option too. And then you have a great job. You're teaching people that want to be there, that have got accepted into a program, or you can teach privately. I have some advice for some people out there that maybe are wondering about how professional musicians become a musician, like a gigging artist. It's very tough. Most of them don't make very much. Like the 1% actually make it, I think, to where like you can actually make a living wage without having to have like a second gig. We're talking like pop stars. Musicians are kind of like the side man. They're getting paid by the big guy, Michael Jackson type guy. Maybe in a band, maybe they're getting paid well, but those are extremely hard positions to get into. Being a performing artist, most of the performing artists I know have students. Most, if not all of them, I think they either supplement their income with private students or another job.
So what you're saying is like if you're performing instrumentalist,
Yeah.
already to begin with, chances are that you're not going to be like the main star there. You're basically there to support somebody who is like the main guy, like you said, like a singer or somebody like that.
Yeah.
So there's already that aspect of it. And then even if you do make it to that level, most of the time they're supplementing their income, teaching students privately, and like you said, some of them, if they're on that level, teaching in colleges, professors, and whatnot.
One thing, we're absolutely right. So one thing I would say though, for any student that really wants to be a performer, try this. Doesn't matter if you're in high school or in college. If you're in high school, of course, you may need your parental consent. But I think that you'll be on a good track if you can make your own band. Doesn't matter what you play. If you play saxophone, clarinet, trumpet, make your own band, like a trio, like jazz or whatever you may be interested. Maybe even a classical band, whatever, rock band, some type of rock band with instruments. If you can make your own ensemble and get yourself out there where other people see it, then I think you have a shot at being successful later on down the road.
Really, even from that early age.
Sure, I've seen people do it. In high school, they start up like a combo, like especially instrumentalists, they start up like a jazz combo. If you can start your own jazz combo, other people actually want to perform with you, and then you actually get some performing opportunities, then you might have a good chance of being successful.
Well, see, that even makes me curious about the whole state of like music education in general, because I'm thinking at that point, like if you're already doing the thing, which is like the goal of music performance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal of going through music performance is not for the sake of the program itself, but it's so that you can actually perform music. But if you're already performing music, it kind of makes me wonder then, do you even need to have a music performance degree in order to perform music?
We think about throughout the whole history of humanity. No, you don't. You just have to be very good.
Mm-hmm.
But formally, there's a program that teaches you the proper techniques and styles to be a very good performing artist. These degrees in music are kind of a new thing, probably in the last 50, 60 years for the most part. You know, so most of the best performing artists out there had no formal education in like a university setting. They just heard somebody else or made their own style and were very good at it. They just were, you know, a protege, very talented person, and like your Charlie Parkers, you know, John Coltrane, all these different people never had, you know, formal education. They just had the talent, you know, knew the right people to get gigs. People loved to hear them, and it worked out that way.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an ideal situation. Now you're talking about like your
Because at the end of the day,
0.1%, you know.
right,
of the people
right.
out
You're talking about the people that really like kind of stand out.
Like your Mozarts. I mean, how many Mozarts are there
Right.
out there right now?
And it's like you can learn technical skill, but one thing that can't be taught necessarily is the genius behind it, or
That's
you,
right.
you can't necessarily teach the work ethic to spend hours and hours.
Like another good
practicing.
example of that's Ray Charles. Yeah, he went to the school of the deaf and blind, and he learned how to play some instruments. But beyond that, he didn't even go for that. I think the whole 4 years. He went for a couple of years, and then just started performing and started picking up gigs, and just had a genius mindset. You can't learn that,
Mm-hmm.
and was a great performer too, and a great businessman. Probably worked. I know he worked so much, so he was traveling all the time. That's one drawback. Once you get so good at your art, like Ray Charles and all these other, Michael Jackson, if you have a family, you're on the road for how many days of the year? Half the year, most of the year. So that there's a drawback to that.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, okay, that life's not really something I want to do. I like traveling, but I don't want it to be like that necessarily. So there's some give and takes.
So it's like, because it's like you kind of have to think a couple steps ahead. It's like, yes, I want to be a performer, but do I really want everything that goes along with that as well? And it's like if you're not willing to have that type of flexibility, or if that's just not the lifestyle that you're wanting to go for, then maybe music performance within that context is not going to be the best fit.
Yeah, I would say if you have any doubt about it, don't do it.
Mm.
Like find some. There's a lot of other good opportunities out there. I mean, the most important thing is get a steady job. You know, I know a lot of pretty good musicians that have a steady job and then do music on the side. Like they'll play a gig like once a week at a bar or somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, or maybe with a performing group,
Yeah.
and that's fine too. But my advice, you know, after trying to pursue music education, music performance, at the end of the day, unless you have like wealth coming from your parents or somewhere that somebody gave you the money, or independently wealthy, you're going to need a source of income.
So what it kind of sounds like is like you're wanting to set a realistic expectation.
Right.
So if I had to kind of recap in a certain sense what you said, it's like unless you know that you're gonna go for music and you're gonna put like 110% into it, and even then you might still want to supplement it with something, unless you kind of have like some kind of trust fund or
Yeah,
something,
exactly.
something kind of like set up. That for most people, if you're gonna go down the music route, be passionate about it. If
Very
you're not passionate about it,
I was
in
passionate
terms of-
about it.
Yeah, right. You
Yeah.
were passionate about it, and like it.
I got some students,
Mhm.
but you know, also too, I realized for me when I got to New York City, like I kind of wanted to be a performing artist, but you know, I would see performing artists play at night, and it's like I'm here to listen to you, and I'm like imagining I could be you, but then it's like wow, I'd be playing right now and be up all night until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and playing for how much? Probably not very much. I don't know. And it's like wow, I'd rather not do that. That's really time consuming, and then you're up all night.
Yeah.
You know.
Would you say that in a certain sentence you lose a little bit of what kind of got you into music in the first place, which was like the hobby aspect of it? And I don't mean when I say hobby, I don't mean it in like a trivial sense, but I mean truly as something that's like recreational, something that you find a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment in. Kind of taking it in this professional aspect in a certain sense takes away a little bit of that hobby aspect of it. Would you
No,
say that was
It didn't take away from that at all.
It didn't.
No, I
at
love
all.
playing for my own enjoyment, for sure. I have a piano. If you go to music school and you don't play piano, you have to take 2 years of piano. Most people hate it. I loved it to the point where I was pretty good at it, and I have a piano here.
I had mixed feelings when I had to take a couple
Yeah.
different, you know.
Right, so you know.
So people love it, some people love it, some people don't.
Right.
I love it. So just for my own enjoyment, I play piano. I learned how to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And just for my own enjoyment now, I play saxophone.
Gotcha.
You know,
So you still play now. You
Just for my
play
enjoyment.
in your own, you know, for your own enjoyment. So you mentioned before. So right now you're working for utility company,
That's right.
right? And so how long you been doing that for?
well, in general, I've been working for utility companies now since 2017. Here we are in 2024, so about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
This one here in Orlando, over 3 years now.
Gotcha.
And most people, it's a good steady job. Most people make it a career. I don't necessarily want to make it a career.
You don't want to make it a career. Okay.
I feel like I'm called to do more things, better things.
Okay, so tell me about that then. What are some things that you have set in your sights for the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, something like that?
One of these things is this podcast. Promoting, hearing the stories of other people, and then promoting what they do as well. So many people I'm going to be talking to and hearing the stories will have like their own businesses, or they'll be doing something that I can promote and bring awareness to, and other people can hear and benefit from as well. Hopefully they can benefit from my stories, and then from there, you know, I could kind of improve upon that and work on that and make this my own thing, my own business.
So the name of the podcast is Common Ground Stories. Was there would you say there have been like figures in your life, or like maybe even if it's not an entire person and their whole story, but maybe just a conversation you have with them, have there been moments in your life where you felt like maybe learning what you shared in common with a certain person, has that ever changed your perspective, like for the better, in a way it's like, wow, you know what, I'm actually glad I had that conversation with that person. I learned something new about them and it had that positive impact? Because that's the only conclusion that I can draw from that, is that you've probably experienced that a couple of times in your life, to where it made such an impact on you that you kind of want to take this on now as like more of a, you know, like a calling. That's what I can assume.
Well, I mean, for this particular, for my podcast, absolutely. Yeah, I have some family members that have their own business or had their own business, and you know, they didn't think about it as a job. You know, perhaps certainly it was a job, a source of income, but there was just life for them. It was just, they would just love what they did. You know, some of my family members had a tree farm, and it was very successful. You know, they got to call the shots. They got to, you know, do what they wanted. They got to determine when they come to work. They got to build it in their way. They got to determine what kind of plants they sell. They got to determine who they sold to a certain extent. You know, they could determine who they wanted to market to, what areas they want to market in, who they want to build relationships with. And so, looking at that, seeing some of my family members with their businesses, saying, "Hey, this is what I think I could be good at," building relationships with other people, and setting my own schedule, kind of, you know, having my own timeline of what I want to do things, but also not being lazy about it. Not saying, "Oh, I want to do this later." No, like, hey, I want to achieve, you know, having X, Y, and Z viewers, or X, Y, and Z people to interview, my friends, family, people I don't know, other people that have successful businesses, ordinary people, and what we can all share in common with each other. Like for me, I'm giving my advice about music to other people who may be interested in music or curious about what it's like to be music education major, or what it's like to be a performer, curious about what it's like to live in New York City, curious about what it's like to live in Orlando.
Do you see this podcast as filling some sort of need or some lack that you currently see within like society or within our culture as a whole?
I think so. A lot of podcasts I see are either about themselves or about like interviewing celebrities or like people that are well known, and those are fine. But where we have a gap here, you have somebody that's themselves or interviewing people at like the top. Me, I want to kind of go somewhere in the middle, bringing on and introducing ordinary people, right? So not celebrities necessarily, but ordinary people that have done extraordinary things, like started from nothing, like me, but I'm working towards something. I have my own story. Born and raised in Orlando, to parents that were divorced, going through school, learn how to play the saxophone, hours a day, little support, end up, taking private lessons, make it into college. First time in my family, in my immediate family, that somebody goes to college. One of the few in my whole entire family, you're talking about aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins. One of the few in my whole extended family that's made it to college and graduated. And so having people like that on, who have overcome a lot of obstacles and have achieved greatness and are working to continue to achieve something, and that we can all have a takeaway from.
So in other words, kind of seeing how your story intersects with other people's, and hearing the success story of a person who's right next to you,
Exactly.
rather than always trying to idealize maybe some of these higher figures, which while there's absolutely nothing wrong, because it almost sounds like you've had some pretty important figures in your life that have been super impactful and influential to you as well.
Yeah.
But being able to hear, I guess, from people that are a bit more like yourself, hearing what success they have to share and the influence that people around them had and how they became successful as they are. What do you do now in your spare time for fun? What are you doing when you're not working?
I like to go fishing a lot. I'm working on this podcast a lot.
Mhm.
I like to hang out with my family and friends.
Yeah.
Help them out with their needs as well. A lot of people call me up saying, "Hey, Nick, I need you to help me out, so such and such." So I get a lot of those things I help out with too. Sometimes I relax, but no, fishing, helping out family members and friends, and hanging out with family members and friends, working on my podcast, helping other people with their needs.
What's one thing that you hope you could see yourself doing within 10 years?
I hope within 10 years that my podcast has grown where I have a lot of important but ordinary people on the series, but they can give great life advice, showing how they came up from ordinary means, and now they've made it in life to a certain extent. Not a celebrity, but they've accomplished more or less the American dream, I should say. Ordinary people that do extraordinary things. That's my podcast, Common Ground series, stories that has taken off, and that I'm continuing to interview, all these great people, and then out, branching out to other things, maybe seminars, hosting conferences, meeting other ordinary people, sharing our common ground.
Mm-hmm.
Those type of things. Traveling a lot more. I want to travel the world.
You mentioned something before about faith, and you were describing how that was part of, I guess, some major transition points in your life. Does that at all play a part in anything that you're doing right now?
I'm a man of deep faith, and so my outlook with doing everything ultimately comes down to the faith I have as a Christian, as a Catholic. Everything I do is ultimately for one purpose, and that's getting to heaven. And so this podcast is a means for me on earth to kind of guide me there in a certain sense, as my life call perhaps. But continuing to work on my faith, sharing my faith with others perhaps, and continuing to be the best person I can be for myself, the best version of myself I can be, continuing to grow in that kind of faith, and to have that also moral compass guide me, not just with my podcast, but other things I do in life as well. Well, I'm looking forward to see where this goes, having you on as a co-host. Especially we're going to have roundtable discussions with some other guests, and we're going to be talking about perhaps current events or issues that are always important, like common issues in society, different topics of discussion, perhaps on a bi-weekly or monthly basis with you and with some others.
Yeah.
And then, as the series progresses, we can continue to hear about some of my life stories, life experiences as well, and hear about your life experiences and stories and others as we continue to progress this Common Ground Stories podcast.
Sounds fantastic. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Well, Nick, I think that's all the questions that I've got. That's all I got for today. So I think this is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure a lot of people are, looking forward to hearing more about you and, other things that you have to share in the future. I know today you had kind of like a limited time, but I know that there's much, much, much more to share. So I know for my part, I'm looking forward to hearing more from you, and I'm always looking forward to being back here and just sitting and chatting it up, having a good conversation.
Right on. I
All right.
appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you.